And judges, please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Philpott. I am a trial lawyer. My office is in central New Hampshire, and I practice statewide in state and federal courts. This is my third year judging the national finals. How about Michael?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Michael Anderson, and I'm a retired professor, retired college administrator, and now I work at the local public schools here in Walker, Minnesota with Native American students.
Hi, my name is Molly Russell. I'm an attorney at Legal Aid of West Virginia, and I specialize in domestic violence law. This is my first year. I almost said as an attorney, but that would be false. This is my first year as a judge for nationals.
And why don't you introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, my name is Owen Toller.
I'm Heath Watson.
Andrew Bratton.
Hannah Alsadi.
And your teacher is Tom O'Hare?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we are Unit 4, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
How have the values and principles embodied in the Constitution shaped American institutions and practices? Question 1, quote, "It would be inconsistent with constitutional separation of the executive and legislative powers to let the prerogative, the pardon power, be exercised by the latter," close quote. What were the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power, and do you agree or disagree with them? According to the framer, James Wilson, if the president abuses the pardon power, quote, "he can be impeached and prosecuted," close quote. Do you agree with Wilson? Why or why not? In your opinion, what constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors?
In regard to the first question, the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power all goes back to the idea that the president is the commander-in-chief, a man of civic virtue as expressed in John Locke's social contract and James Madison's Federalist 10. The presumed mindset of the framer was that the president should possess the pardon power because although he is not in the legislative branch, he is a man of civic virtue. Therefore, he can be trusted to protect people from a faction-controlled Congress. When the Constitution was ratified, not everyone was on board. An anonymous pamphlet came out under the pseudonym Brutus, warning the people that this new Congress will fall prey to factions or groups of people that will take positions of power and destroy the nation. At this time, factions taking over the country was a very real fear for some citizens. To calm these sentiments, James Madison wrote Federalist 10 in response to Brutus, defending the new government and reassuring the public that factions will never take over in a large republic because it is too large. Factions may take over state government, but they could never overpower federal government of all states due to the fact that electors from each state would be men of civic virtue. It gave the president the pardon power in order to protect the people from a faction controlling Congress as expressed by Madison in Federalist 10.
Finishing up question 1, I agree with the pardon power because I can totally understand the fear of factions that the country had at the time. And they did as much as they could to prevent that, including enabling the president with pardon power. I also agree with pardon power because the president was designed to be a man of civic virtue, a man of the people making decisions to benefit the people, as stated in Federalist 10. While I agree with the pardon power, I do acknowledge that it has become politicized for personal and political gain for the president, and the politics and the presidency have evolved very much since 1787. An example of the politicization of the pardon power was recent pardons by President Trump, pardoning Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, popular rappers and pop culture, for Trump to gain support from the masses.
On question 2, certainly agree with framer James Wilson. If the president abuses his pardon power, then he can be impeached and prosecuted because he is not upholding the expectation of chief executive, commander-in-chief, the president of the United States of America, as being a man of civic virtue and doing what is right for the people as a whole and society. If the president abuses his pardon power by pardoning clearly proven criminals for no reason, He is acting as a monarch or a dictator, and these actions cannot and will not be tolerated in a public or representative democracy. The president should be impeached for abusing his pardon power because he is not acting as a president/virtuous man, but as a monarch or a dictator.
To finish this question up, no one really knows what high crimes and misdemeanors really are. This term goes back to England prior to the colonization of America. But we have to use our best judgment to reason what it truly means. I think that this should not be too overcomplicated, and we should use our best judgment to determine what it exactly means. Using my best judgment as a 17-year-old, high crimes and misdemeanors are criminal actions committed in office, whether it's federal crimes, bribery, or thievery. Since the president is in such a different position than a normal citizen, most misdemeanors are out of the question, including speeding tickets, shoplifting, etc. If a president is convicted of committing a federal crime in office, or does something to clearly violate his role in acting in the best interest of Commander-in-Chief of America and its people, for example, proven conspiracies with other countries for Americans to clearly damage the country in any manner should be a high crime and misdemeanor and should not be tolerated. For example, the recent Trump impeachment controversy is a tricky one. While Trump did not necessarily incite the riot, he came out afterward, said that they were good people, and told them in a lax manner to go home. The situation is tricky because he did not necessarily incite the
Okay,
rebellion.
I'm sorry, but your time is up. They're holding
Thank
up the
you.
time card. Thank you. I had a very interesting thought while you were talking here. You were talking about convictions of crime while in office. A tricky process, understandably. But what about war crimes? What about convictions in international tribunal for war crimes? Should that be an impeachable offense?
I believe that it would be an impeachable offense because, well, can you exactly define war crimes for me, please?
Well, there's an international standard and there's an international tribunal where people are tried for war crimes, for things that are done in the name of war that other countries believe are illegal.
Well, just me being from the Middle East, I understand that Trump earlier had pretty much killed a person in the Middle East of very high, standards. And I believe that that should be impeachable, as I believe in diplomacy. So pretty much the fact that he went out and murdered this person, good nor bad, that is a misdemeanor against the other country. So that's what I believe is it is impeachable. And if the president does abuse his power in that standpoint, then he shall and will be impeached.
I don't think it is an impeachable offense because it's within the country. The president has the power to control the military to make those major decisions as what is going to happen. I think that the president can get convicted in the other country because he would be breaking a law from the other country that they think is wrong. But as for within the United States, I don't. That's right. As I'm not saying it's a good thing if the president does something, but there's just a fine line between is he pushing it or is it actually something that was needed to benefit the country to make an advancement in the war or battle or whatever we're doing.
Well, let's change it up then and say, what if the president is responsible, the executive branch on the president's order is responsible for gathering up and detaining journalists because they don't like what they're saying? Is that an impeachable offense?
I don't think that is an impeachable offense. If he can you repeat that? You said you would just gather them up and question arrest them. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Yeah, I do think that is an impeachable offense because you can throw in like the Supreme Court case of the New York Times versus U.S. that protected free speech under the press, And I think he'd be violating their free speech if he did that.
I agree, because taking away the media in this country is kind of like becoming what this country is not supposed to be. Like, we're supposed to be open and honest about our politics, and if you take away the media and say just because they don't agree with you, that's kind of ruining the whole values of our own country.
Yeah, building on that, like the media is an important like linkage institution in our country that can link the people to their government. And if you take that away, then it's not a real democracy.
Muted. Sorry, I was muted. Let's go down a different pathway for a moment. In the start of your presentation, you laid out the idea that the President of the United States should have a sense of civic virtue, and that came from some of the framers' notions. So what are the characteristics of a person, for example, a President of the United States, who does exhibit civic virtue? What do you see in that person?
Well, at the time, and as it was expressed in Federalist 10, the executive branch was created to be basically like a man of the people, of society, just in case, like, to protect them from like a tyrannical Congress at the time. They really feared, our founding fathers really feared a tyrannical Congress, and think the president, a man of civic virtue, should possess like important leadership qualities where he truly does what's best for society, not for himself or his own political gain. And that's what I think.
I personally believe that the founding fathers were a little off putting whenever they said that a president should have civic virtue. To me, there is really no measure of civic virtue. To me, there is no one on this earth with civic virtue. Even the founding fathers, as high as we esteem them, were humans. And I feel as if we may hold these people up to be almost godlike when really they're humans just as us. So
Okay, so I agree with you that we do sometimes hold them in too high a regard. But if they
Yes.
were a human, as you are stating, what would those human qualities be? One of you people said leadership. What do you think?
Well, I believe that civic virtue includes diplomacy and being able to have an open mind with everything, being able to have empathy, sympathy, compassion for the crowds.
Yeah, I think the president is supposed to be the major representation of the people of the United States. Congress is more of representing the states, and the judicial branch is kind of not representing anyone. They're supposed to be the level surface playing. But the president is supposed to do and decide what is best for the people. And we elect that person with the intent that they have the qualities that can make those decisions for us. So I think as long as they uphold what they promise, they're very like virtuous and honest about what they believe in, and then they actually carry it out, I think that makes a person of civic virtue.
So if a president is not being virtuous, as you said, or upholding the beliefs of the people in pardoning people like Lil Wayne, do you think impeachment is an effective tool?
Not necessarily, because I mean, like Hannah said earlier, we hold people to high standards, but everyone makes mistakes because they're all human. If it isn't a high crime of misdemeanor or something that like it's an actual federal crime, yes, they should be impeached. But if they're not holding true to their words, you can't convict someone for saying something and then not acting on it. That's not a crime.
I also don't think it's very effective because impeachment has become so like political. And so like no matter what, whatever side you're on, you're going to vote for your president because you don't want him on your bad side and you don't want your other Congress members on your bad side. So it's not very effective because it's not a question of did he do something wrong? It's a question of am I a Republican or a Democrat?
Yeah, building on what Andrew said, it all goes back to the politicization the pardoning power. And like recently, like whenever Trump pardoned, Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, that was after he had already lost the election. I think he was just trying to get as much public support as he could from people like of our age and younger generations who maybe look up to these people, or maybe they might not know a whole lot about politics and see that they pardoned their favorite rapper, and then that makes them want to support Trump or whatever.
Okay.
I just think
We're going to
that
have to cut you off there because we're out of time, but thank you very much for your comments and your thoughts. And I guess the question that I missed and should have asked in the end of this here was, okay, if it's between Brutus and Madison, who won? Who was correct? But I think you've touched on that throughout your conversations. I think you bring to this a lot of pretty well formed personal opinions. That's good, and it's good that you're comfortable in this context expressing what those are, because this competition is not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about the level of thought and the level of understanding that you bring to this competition process. And I think you guys did a very good job in that. And I think you all did. And I think I also I like the discourse between and among you. It's pretty clear that you have respect for one another as well as for the process. So thank you very much, South Carolina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael?
Okay. I too think we should carefully consider whether the assassination of a leader of a revolution in another country, Syria, is an impeachable offense. I hadn't thought of that. That helped me understand a little bit where your minds are. That was pretty good. By the way, Madison's 10th Federalist is, I think, the most interesting of all the Federalist Papers. And the notion of factions, you were handling that quite well. And some argument say that the factions that the founding fathers saw, they wanted them to be localized so they could stay in control in DC, which is an interesting concept as well. However, the thing I liked best about what you were talking about was something I've been talking to students about for 30 years. And that is that don't see the founding fathers in too high of a regard. Don't see them as godlike. They had lots of human frailties, not the least of which was their treatment of African Americans. But what they were great at is what you're good at, and that is to become students of government. They studied the Greeks, they studied the Romans, they studied English history, they studied French philosophers, and they studied Native American under the Confederation of the Iroquois. The point is that they were students and they got better and they learned. And you are the ones that need to take that to the next step. You're students of government, and you made me think in multiple ways today that I hadn't thought about in a while. And I thank you for that. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Holly?
A man of civic virtue is going to stick with me for a while.
Yeah, well, we're looking for a woman of civic virtue as well. So
We're looking for a person of civic virtue.
A person of civic virtue. I think ultimately the point that no such person exists is like, yes, bingo. So I appreciated that. I would have liked to see, so to echo Ed's point, you guys have full formed opinions at as far as like to quote your 17-year-olds with full formed opinions, and I enjoyed hearing them. I would like to see you tie in a bit more supporting evidence, a little bit more historical background, a little bit more context. Tell me how you got to your opinion. I'd like to go a little bit more on the journey. And then lastly, I think your point about the evolution of pardons was well taken and just spot on. So overall, good job, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We congratulate the students on their participation and effort today. Thank you, guys. And judges, let me stop the recording first.